study sensation and perception in psychology, it is because we're trying to understand how our brain and our mind make sense of the outside world. So the first thing that's important to understand is what both sensation and perception are. So sensation is really just any time one of your five senses gets stimulated by the outside world. Again, the five senses are sight, smell, touch, hearing, and taste. So if we were sensing something or having a process of a sensation, it would be hearing somebody call our name, tasting a piece of fruit, smelling a flower. Then perception is our mind making sense of the sensation. So essentially, it's organizing it, it's figuring out what it is, it's sending the signal to the right area of the brain, so that if we did smell a flower, we could say, okay, that was a flower, and flowers smell nice. Or if we were tasting a piece of fruit, we would say, okay, that was an apple, and that tasted good. So how we get from sensation to perception is called transduction. Now, what transduction basically is that it's the process of converting sensory signals, so anything that we get picked up in our sensation, and converting it into neural signals that travel into the correct area of our brain so that perception can occur. Now, that's the basic process of how we get from step A to step B, but there's a few special things that we have to know to understand it a little deeper. The first is called psychophysics. Now, what this basically is, it's a measure, so it's something we use when we study this. And what it does is it tells us, it tells us the difference between the strength of the stimulus and the sensitivity of a response. And we measure the difference between these two things in order to understand what the relationship is between how strong something has to be when you sense it in order for you to perceive it. So it depends on different sensitivity rates in each individual person. So for example, it would be like, how strong does the smell of cologne have to be before we perceive it? Okay, so from there we talk about a few just little key terms to go with it. The first one being signal detection theory. And what signal detection theory basically is it states that we will only sense something if we are sensitive to it. So it says the basis of which we detect a signal is if we're sensitive to the signal, and also it depends on how much noise is present. So if you're at a crowded basketball game and somebody calls your name, that's going to be a little harder to pick out unless you're sensitive to it. But if you're in a quiet room and somebody says your name, you're going to pick it up almost immediately. And then there is something called sensory adaptation. And what this basically is getting used to a sense and having it decrease. So an example of that would be like those Febreze commercials that talk about going nose blind. Like you walk into somebody's house and it smells really bad, but the person that lives there doesn't smell it because their senses have had time to adapt, and so they don't smell it anymore, or at least as strongly as you do the first time you walk into the house. And even as you sit in the house, you notice that you smell it less and less and less and less. And then there is perceptual constancy. And what this basically says is that even if little things change, we still perceive it the same. So essentially, a good example of this would be like if your friend was to change their hair color. Even though something about the sight sensation has changed in her hair color, you still know it's your friend. Or like, I know that the textbook uses an example where it talks about like different colors in movies and things. So like in Guardians of the Galaxy, when she's green, you still know it's the actress Zoe Saldana. And that's pretty much it for sensation and perception.